Madam Clerk, welcome to Cuyahoga County's Council Operations Intergovernmental Relations and Public Transportation Committee, Tuesday, April 30th, in the Cuyahoga County Administrative Headquarters, C. Ellen Conley Council Chambers, 4th floor. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Jones. Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Schrein. Mr. Schrein is absent at the moment. There is a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and to my colleagues, thank you for your attendance. Is there any public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you. Looking for the approvals of the minutes for the November 21st meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much. It approves. There are no matters referred to the committee, but we do have, I think by charter, our Agency of the Inspector General semi-annual report from July 1, 23 to December 31st, 23. And I believe we have a presenter, and that would be our Inspector General. And please welcome yourself to the podium and begin the, we talked about you'd prefer to have each slide, we ask a question or two if we have them. Would that be accurate?
Yes, that would be perfect.
Okay. Let the record reflect that Chairman Schrein is in attendance. And thank you very much. The floor is yours, Madam Inspector General.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Alexa Beeler. I'm the Inspector General for Cuyahoga County. Council members, Chairman Sweeney, thank you for allowing me to come present to you today. I am going to be presenting both semi-annual reports from last year. So this will give a big picture review of all of the work our agency accomplished last year.
Can you remind us and the viewing audience why you come twice a year?
So we are required by code to file a semi-annual report, and so typically the Inspector General comes and reports the findings at the end of each half. I did not get a chance to come present the first half before we started running into the budget hearings, so I'm presenting both halves today.
Sounds good, but I just wanted to, it's code for the filing, but it's practice.
Exactly.
Heard publicly.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Okay, a big part of what we do is we receive whistleblower complaints from any source through any method. You'll see on the slide that the first half of 2023, we received 62 whistleblower complaints, and the second half, we received 48 whistleblower complaints. When we receive a complaint, we do what we call triage. So we discuss the complaint and determine the most common sense and practical way to resolve it. If the allegation concerns individuals or operations within our jurisdiction and allege either a violation of the county ethics code or fraud, waste, or abuse, we roll that complaint into an investigation and assign a primary and secondary investigator. If the allegation involves a person or agency outside of our jurisdiction, or if the allegation itself would not be appropriately handled by our agency, then we determine the best way to resolve the complaint to ensure the concern is appropriately addressed. So sometimes that looks like putting it in the hands of management or HR if it's a personnel matter, and sometimes it might be that we refer either the complaint or the complainant to the appropriate agency. The pie charts show how the complaints were resolved for each half. Just a few things of note. Alternative appeals process available. That is when there's already a prescribed process to deal with an issue and a complainant comes to us mid-process, typically because they don't like the answers they're receiving by going through the appropriate channel. And we don't obviously want to interfere in any prescribed process, so we don't investigate those issues. Also, no prima facie violation. That is when an allegation, even if it was true, would not be a violation of anything. So obviously we would not investigate those any further. I do want to note in about half of all of the instances, we are referring management in some way, whether it's just referring the complaints to management and not requiring a response, or utilizing what we call management inquiries, which is when we do require a response as to the allegations, and then we use their answer to determine whether we need to do anything further with that in our agency. Any questions before I go forward?
Just a couple maybe, right? When you said we, who's we? Is it, you have a team down there?
I have an A-plus all-star team, yes. We have staff, fully staffed at the beginning of the year was, well, actually, all of 2023, we had eight. We had eight staff members. We did, this year, one of our staff members retired in York.
I got to go to the party. It was
Yes, you
it
were
was
kind
kinda
enough
cool
to.
to be part of the family atmosphere down there, and the gentleman was kind of overwhelmed that it was a nice recognition for him. So thank you for letting me have a piece of cake, but I didn't have any pizza.
Well, thank you for presenting him with the resolution that we had prepared. I know that meant a lot to him. But no, we have a great team, hardworking staff. I couldn't ask for
You
anything
said
better.
we investigate. Is that two people? Two people are assigned to it? Is it 10, all 8 of them get together and look at it? How does that actually work?
So when we receive the complaints in triage, there's 3 of us that go through triage to determine what to do with the complaints. How are we going to handle each different allegation that comes in? When the matter, if we do decide to roll a matter into an investigation, we have been assigning 2 investigators to those investigations, a primary and secondary. But it really is the whole process is a team effort. I mean, even for the investigations, a lot of times we are bringing them up at staff meetings. We're getting everybody's input just because the more minds you have at the table, you get everybody's perspective, and sometimes you discover different ways of looking at things, so.
Thank you for defining the we. With the lack of information component, do you stop there, or do you keep trying to figure it out?
So,
How deep do you dig, basically?
yes, so we did have one complaint last year that we did have to close as lack of information, which is my least favorite disposition, because typically we like to follow up with the complainants to dig a little deeper on the specifics of the allegation, because even if we aren't going to investigate it, we would at least want to get it into the right hands. However, sometimes with anonymous complaints, if they don't leave contact information and then just a very broad allegation, sometimes, unfortunately, there is just not much we can do with it. So sometimes we'll get something as broad as John Smith is engaging in multiple policy violations. Without more and without being able to contact a complainant, we can't do much with something like that. So unfortunately, there are instances where we close them out as lack of information. Thankfully, like I said, there was only one last year where we had to utilize that. But typically, our practice would be to contact the complainant. And we do encourage people, even if they want to file a complaint anonymously, and because sometimes people will reach out to us before they are going to file, for instance, an online whistleblower complaint, we encourage, even if you want to be anonymous, that's fine, make up an email address. Let us have some way to communicate with you, just something, so we can get more information should we need it, so that we can keep our investigations going.
Thank you. And to my colleagues, I shouldn't have bogarted the thing. I should ask if you have any questions first, and then I'll get to it. Anybody? Okay. Thank you very much. And I think it came when you first started, you had to catch up a little bit. Are you caught up? Are you with your
Yes.
23s? Are you 2 behind, or not behind? They're still closed and open, because that's how you gauged your efficiency, right?
Yes, so, and I will get to that in a couple slides. We are now, starting in 2022, we started implementing some
We will get to
measures.
that.
We
I
will
don't
get
want-
to that,
I
but
wanna
one
get-
of those pieces actually does deal with the way we are resolving our complaints. The six halves leading up to my term, about 25% of the complaint dispositions, when you would look at the same data, it said open, so they were remaining in the open status. So one of the big process improvements that we've implemented is we triage complaints almost immediately, but definitely within 5 business days. So you'll notice, obviously, that we have no complaints remaining in the open status as of the end of each of these halves. So that has definitely helped keep things moving and helped us handle our matters timely.
Slide 2,
Slide 2.
or 3, I should say.
Okay, so as you can see on the slide, the first half, we completed 26 investigations, and the second half, we completed 25 investigations, and that's right about at average. This is a combination of the whistleblower complaints that were rolled into investigations, as well as investigations that our agency initiated. You'll see that in about half the instances, for both halves actually, it just so happened that about half the time we found no violations, and about the other half that there was an issue. a note about a couple of the statuses. The no violation management referral, that's when we found that the subject did not violate the county ethics code. However, the investigative report was still referred to management because maybe there were systemic issues that we identified or just something that we wanted management to look at. In the instances where we did identify an issue or a violation, those are then referred to management for discipline. Through these investigations, for all of 2023, we identified $1,644,776 in challenge costs, and we'll get to where those numbers came from later throughout the presentation. Any questions there?
Anybody? Just, you mentioned whistleblower, or you initiate it.
Yes.
How about it just comes like from a department or the administration saying, hey, check this out as the Inspector General? What would that be? Not a whistleblower, they're just,
Well, it would still be logged as a complaint first. So it would be opened in our system as a complaint. We discuss it during triage and most likely roll it into an investigation. There are some times when a department comes to us with a concern that it might not end up being rolled into an investigation. Most of the time it does. So maybe they aren't, well, they would still be, per the whistleblower policy, defined as a whistleblower because they're coming to us with a complaint. But so that would be the path for that. Now, if we decided and I will be talking about one of our investigations that we initiated in a few slides, but that would just be, we opened an investigation if it's AIG initiated.
and last one is just when you're doing an investigation, what triggers the referral to management?
So when we identify an issue, so if it's something where, if we received an allegation about a person that they violated the county ethics code, so there's a subject of our investigation, if we found that that person did indeed violate the county ethics code, at that point we would refer the investigative report to either management, management and or the Department of Human Resources for likely discipline.
What's your definition of management?
The person's
The eighth
director.
floor or the director?
Typically the department director. Some of the bigger ones that have, some of our bigger reports we do send to the 8th floor. Mostly if it's concerning an individual in a department that has violated a provision of the county ethics code, that would typically just be the director of the agency and the director of human resources.
Thank you for that descriptive answer to my questions. Please continue.
Okay. Okay, so as we are working to increase transparency and accountability in county government, we think that it is also imperative that we are also fully transparent and accountable. To that end, in 2022, we implemented new reporting measures to help gauge how we are truly performing as an agency. One such measure is reporting on how long it takes to complete our investigation. So the way we're measuring this is from the day we receive a complaint to the day the report is issued. So it's not the day that the complaint is rolled into an investigation. So it's truly measuring how we're doing in all of the stages of our cases. The slide shows how we have done each half since we started tracking the timeliness of the completion of our investigations. It shows the average days that it's taken us to complete the investigations as well as the median days. You'll see that in 2022, the numbers were very high as we worked to clean up the older outstanding investigations. Also of note for that year, we completed a total of 105 investigations that year. So by the end of 2022, we were for the most part current in our investigations. So in 2023, those numbers reflect a more accurate depiction of how long it takes us to move through our cases. Another measure that we report on for transparency and accountability purposes is the age and number of our investigations remaining open as of the end of each half. So as of the end of the first half of 23, we had 13 open cases that had been open an average of 90 days. And as of the end of the second half, we had 12 open cases for an average of 63 days.
Any questions? Definition of open, because each case is different. One could be 3 days and one could be
Over a year.
months.
Yep.
And that looks bad for you because it's 6 months and it's open, but just on paper.
Right. And there are some cases that just by their nature take a very long time, and that's okay. The main objective, of course, is to have a complete, thorough investigation where we look at every possible angle of the allegation or whatever it may be that we're looking at. However, we do want to be mindful that reports lose their value the longer that they take to be issued. So timeliness is important. It is a priority, but we do recognize that there are just some cases that are going to take longer. Also, a case might take longer because we're waiting on documents, or we're waiting on some data, or we're interviewing several people and maybe the interviews have to go in a certain order and they take a long time to set up. So there's a lot of factors that go into it that are outside of our control, but it's just something to keep us motivated to keep our cases moving along.
Open is active. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Those two words together, and are some less active? Because it looks like in 22, they were open but may not have much activity in regards to their due diligence happening.
Correct. So a lot of the cases that we closed in 2022, as we were kind of cleaning up the older matters, had been open for a long time. As you could see by the numbers, 671 days. So they had been open for some time. Now, by reporting out or continuing to report on the time it takes us to complete our investigations, as well as the number and age of our cases that are still ongoing as of the end of each half, I think that those two things will keep us accountable.
I got it, yeah. So in my eyes, under your leadership, if it's open, it's active.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
You can't assume open means dormant.
Correct. I
That's
would
what I
not
wanted,
assume.
'cause that's the
Yes,
perception you can
thank
see.
you. Yes, open does not mean dormant. Now, I will also say that these numbers are a combination of investigations prompted by whistleblower complaints, as well as the investigations we've opened because we want to maybe look into a certain area, and those always take the back seat, or those typically take the back seat to whistleblower complaints. So if we were just measuring whistleblower complaints, especially in 2023 and the current half that we're in, whistleblower complaints are completed more quickly than the investigations that we've decided to initiate.
Nothing's in the back seat. It's all in the front seat, working in a sequential way. Thank you. You get next one, if you don't mind.
Okay, as part of our data analytics program, one of the areas of operations we are looking at is accounts payable, and as a part of that, we are looking at duplicate payments. We consider a duplicate payment to be any time the same invoice is paid twice, whether that's to the same vendor or to two different vendors. In order to pay an invoice in Infor, an invoice number must be entered and a vendor record must be selected. Infor Lawson already has input controls to prevent an exact matching invoice number from being paid to the same unique vendor record. However, duplicate payments can still be issued if, for instance, the input controls are overridden, or if a vendor has more than one vendor record and different vendor records are selected for two different payments. Our data analytics program identifies duplicate payments by first gathering all the data and then doing what we call data cleansing. So we remove any spaces or hyphens or any other characters from certain fields, such as the invoice number. And then the script that has been developed for this program compares certain data fields, such as the field for the invoice number, the vendor record, amount, vendor address, and we run it to see if there is any positive results. If there's a positive result, that might indicate that the county has paid the same invoice twice. For the positive results, we look at the supporting documentation for those payments, and if it's clear that they are for different goods or services, then it's a non-issue. But if it looks like they've uploaded the same invoice for support for both of the payments, then we check to see if payment on both was issued, and if so, whether the checks have been cleared. The top line on the chart is when we've identified that of those positive results, they've used the same invoice for support, payment has been issued, checks have been cleared. So those are the duplicate payments that we've identified. That's on the top row of the slide. That is not great, right? That is not,
It's bad.
that is that is bad. That is not good. It happens, and yes, but it is not obviously what we want. So we started our review of duplicate payments in 2022, and we started with year 2020 data. And then last year in 23, we completed our review of years 2021 and 2022. So you'll see that reflected on the chart as well as the totals. Once we've identified that, okay, these duplicate payments have been issued, payments have gone out, checks have cleared, at that point, we reach out to the departments to see if they have been issued any refunds for one of the erroneous payments, or maybe received a statement credit or something of that sort. The second and third lines on the chart, on the slide, that is when the departments have been able to show us that the county has recouped whatever duplicate payment that was. And so you'll see that in the majority of the instances, it is the vendor who typically identifies the overpayments and takes the steps to refund the county. The total amount on the bottom line is the amount outstanding as of the time the respective reports were issued. So that amount totaled $414,124. We just recently became completely current with this program. So in this half, we've just finished our review of 2023. So this is current, and so now we are working to establish a process where we reach out to the departments, just kind of have a defined process in place to make sure that we aren't just identifying these, that we're making sure that the departments are working to recoup the overpayments. And as part of that, we have heard back from the departments that $72,257 of that has been recovered, and we will continue to work with the departments to hopefully recoup at least a majority, if not all of that amount. So we intend to run this every half, and as I said, we're now current with the program. So we're moving from the establishing phase to the monitoring phase, which is great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you breathe? When I looked at this, it doesn't make any sense that you're in this field. It seems like an auditor function. And are these only the complaints that deal with money that could be duplicates, or I just don't know how the function works? And is one person dedicated to this? Because it seems like it could be a dedicated job for 2 or 3 people if they're looking at the county. So you're fishing for something, but not fishing, looking for something that might be erroneous. So a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so in general, our data analytics program looks into various areas of the county that are typically associated with a high risk of.
This is a totally separate function than investigation.
It's a separate function than us receiving a complaint about a person that's violated the county ethics code and having a subject of the complaint and looking at it that way. This is more looking at the potential for fraud or waste.
The function of government.
The function of our role within the government, which is to look at fraud and waste. So we do for a lot of these things. So for instance, accounts payable, the duplicate payment review that we do is one piece of what we do with accounts payable. We are also looking at some indicators of fraud. That's always number one that we'd be looking at. But we also our mission is also to identify waste. And so our data analytics program is able to automate the review of a ton of data. So the script, we have one person in our agency who's the data analytics program manager. He has developed scripts for all of these, and he's able to gather all the data, run it through the script, and then we follow up on positive results. Some of those do turn into investigations into specific people.
No, it just shows another level of making sure the government works properly and efficiently. And I never really thought about it too much. Mr. Chairman, floor is yours.
Just a couple questions on that. You're doing some background on duplicate payments, it sounds like.
Yes.
And you're checking it out and assuming it's a vendor or it's that's been duplicately paid or an employee that's been duplicately paid. I'm not sure. You haven't identified who is receiving the duplicate payment here?
Vendors. This is for.
Okay, there's a vendor that got duplicate payment.
Yes, this would be either for,
Services or for product or something like that?
exactly, and it's either the duplicate payments that we're looking at, it's when the same invoice is paid twice. So in most of the instances, it's the same vendor receiving two payments for the same invoice, but there are instances where two different vendors are being paid on the same invoice through
I'm so-
errors inputting.
I'm sorry, but I have very little sympathy. It's one thing that the duplicate payment, we should get the money back, they're not entitled to it. But why does our system allow almost $1 million of the duplicate payment in 3 years? What is, I mean, we should be really investigating why our system is allowing that to happen. Not why did they get paid duplicate. Holy crap, I'm just flabbergasted that we're processing payments. Where's the double checks? Because they got to come in with it's got to come in with from the vendor for the amount. It's got to come in with a product. Somebody has to sign off on it. Somebody has to look at that. It's got an invoice number. The invoice number should be seen very easily in a system that you've got a duplicate of invoice number 12345 from that vendor. I mean, it just boggles my mind that we'd be paying over $1 million to vendors. I mean, that means that our system's not working. You're doing your best to collect it after the fact, but it should never even get to your desk.
Yeah, it's just,
It is very eye-opening. I will say, so Infor Lawson has
seems like it's the norm.
Oh, you're talking about $1 million.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So Infor Lawson does have input control. So in the instance where the vendor issues an invoice for invoice 12345. So if somebody was to input that invoice for invoice 12345 and select the vendor record for ABC Company, the payment it starts to go through the approval process and then starts making its way for the payment to get processed. If the department receives maybe another invoice from ABC Company for that same maybe outstanding invoice, if another employee or the same employee goes to not realizing that that invoice has already been attempted to be paid, if they go to enter that invoice 12345, select the vendor record for ABC Company, Infor Lawson will prevent that exact matching payment. But if the second employee maybe enters a space or a dash or a character, or maybe that ABC Company has two vendor records in the system, which is part of the problems that we were seeing too. Maybe they have two vendor records in the system and then the employee selects the other vendor record for ABC Company, those payments will be allowed to be processed. Infor Lawson's input controls won't prevent those. So one of the things that our program does is it cleanses the data, so it takes out all of the characters and the spaces for the invoice numbers, and so it can see, it will flag, okay, wait, no, this is invoice 12345, even though this one has a space or a dash or what have you. We also look for fuzzy matching. So there was one instance actually where the same invoice was paid 3 times, payment on it was issued twice, and it flagged in our system as a duplicate payment. But what happened was the first time it was entered in the system, it was all numerical values. The second time it was entered, it was the same numerical values and they added an A. And then the third time it was input, it had the same numerical value, and then there was a B. So our fuzzy matching, which looks for within a certain range, if the numbers are within a certain range and other fields match, then it would flag in our system, and it turned out that it was a duplicate payment. So we've identified a lot of ways that these errors are happening. I will say I don't have the numbers for 2023 in front of me. However, they are getting better. So the fiscal office is implementing a lot more training for the employees on not overriding the input controls, because a lot of the time, the second person to input payment on an invoice, they just know that it's not going through. They don't realize why it's not going through, but they know they need to pay this invoice, so they might add a character. So there's training that's involved. They're going through, they're cleaning up their vendor records. So the county is definitely improving, and I'll have those numbers for you next time. But no, there was definitely some work to do.
Yeah, it just flabbergasts me. This is just basic business 101. You buy a product, you issue a purchase order, you get an invoice in from from the supplier after they fulfilled their part of the obligation, you match those up and you pay it. And why we would match it up a second time without having, I mean, you should only be matching up one invoice with one purchase order, and that's it. It just boggles my mind. Now, this is also, as I'm sure you're well aware, this is where fraud and corruption takes place, because somebody on the inside, I'm not saying we have anybody, but this is where the stuff gets, if they know that our duplicate payment system is this bad, and I'd be willing to bet you're not catching them all then either. I'll bet you.
I'd like to think that we are, but I'm sure that we're not.
No, you can't be. I mean,
Right.
if they're punching through $1 million worth of this stuff, I would hope that no one's doing this by design. I would like to hope it's accidental, but this is not this is where it takes place, is right here. If you go through anybody's audits of their books, this is exactly how you hide money.
And that is, now that we are in now that this piece of our data analytics program has been established, we are looking into more higher level things, such as, okay, are there multiple vendors that are continuously on our list for
And are they
receiving
even real
duplicate
vendors too?
payments?
I'm sorry,
Right.
but once you've gone this far,
We do look into indicators
there's
for
probably
that
some
also.
fraudulent vendors that don't even exist.
Why don't everybody use the scrubbing program that you have? You have a different one than the fiscal office has?
So we do, there are some things that they can do on the front end, such as maybe there's, by implementing some sort of rule that when you do input an invoice number, maybe you don't include any spaces or dashes or things like that. That could prevent it from at the front end. Ours pulls all the data and runs it through a script, which I think would be hard to do on the front end of thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my first question is whether there's any cases where the county and the vendor are in dispute over whether a payment is duplicate.
Not that I've been made aware. I know now that we've been working with the departments, they're, I think, increasing their efforts with the vendors. So I'm sure that we will hear if there are ultimately any disputes over this, but I have not heard yet that any of these outstanding amounts are due to a dispute between the county and the vendor.
I'd like to look at the last line under 2021 and the last line under 2022. Are these duplicates that have been identified but not yet refunded?
Yes. So the top line is the amount of duplicates that were issued, payment received twice. That next second line is the vendor identified that it received an erroneous payment and took steps to refund the county. And then anything remaining on that last line, on the bottom line, is the amount of money still outstanding as of the time we issued our report. So that amount was still outstanding.
So take 2021, for example. Is any of that money still not been refunded?
So I don't have it broken down by year. I do know that of that total $414,124 that we had identified through the 3 years as being outstanding as of the time the reports were issued, the county has since recouped $72,257. And we are going to be continuing to work with the departments.
So you're saying there's $350,000 still outstanding?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Inspector General, that's outrageous.
It is outrageous.
I mean, I presume 2022 does not involve anything that is newer than December 31st, 2022. Well, that's a year and a half ago. How can how can we have all these duplicate payments made that have been identified and we haven't been refunded yet? How can that be happening?
Well, so for 2021 and 2022, we did just complete our reviews last year. So out of that amount, the $72,000 or so has been recouped, and this is going to be something that we're going to continue to follow up with the departments on. We are also talking internally about what is the best process to ensure that the county is made whole or is at least as close to whole as possible. So is it regularly following up with the departments? At some point, we'll be looping in the law department to try to recoup as much as possible.
I think the chairman of finance is going to dig deep into this, because it makes.
So you're saying, Mr. Chairman, Inspector General, you're saying you're not aware of any cases where the duplication of the payment is in dispute, but yet 1.5 years has passed and $350,000 or so still hasn't been refunded.
Correct.
Something doesn't add up.
It seems like a lack of focus on getting our dollars back. And whatever tools that we need from this particular moment, I think it's an enlightening experience that we're having. You have so much responsibility and, what word do I want to use, ability to collect this stuff. So if it's something that is an oversight, the company should give it back. If it's an oversight and the company knows about it, they don't give it back, we should take one action. If it's some people in cahoots trying to get over on somebody, that's a different course of action. But it all boils down to executing the course of action. And I don't think we have that as a focus,
Well, it is,
particular thing.
and I will say it is a focus in our agency on how we're going to ensure that the departments do execute.
Let me empower you, Madam Inspector General, with the direction of the Council Operations and Intergovernmental Committee. And it's not really your function, but you identified it. And we need to let each department, each director, each finance, each auditor, whatever it is, and we will help this process along to get our money back. So that's something that we can elevate on your world?
Well, that's something that, like I said, has already been elevated on my world. That's something that we've been talking about, how we're going to get the departments. So we've reached out.
We're done talking about it. You are our Inspector General. You're an independent body that has the authority to make sure this government works as ethically as possible. And I'm not getting fussy. I just want to get your recognition in your own mind that this is, as Councilman Miller and Councilman Schron stated, is mind-boggling and makes no sense that we're out $300-some thousand with undisputed claims that got duplicately or triplically paid to an entity that is currently still a vendor of ours, or a vendor that was ours that is still in good standing. So good luck. We're here to help you. And just take this, I mean, you have a lot to do already. But this one's kind of ho-hum in regards to response from the government that we particularly work for. How's that one?
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody more on this one? Let's, because the data's in number 6, so this could be a slide and we can slide on to the next one if it makes sense, because we got data pretty good.
Another piece of our data analytics program looks at payroll for any potential fraud or waste. As of the end of 2023, we completed our review of years 2020 and 2021. You'll see from the slide that we've looked into 2 areas: excessive regular earnings and employees paid past termination. For the excessive regular earnings category, there are a couple different components to this analytic. one of the ways that we look at it is by simply looking at, did any employees receive payment for an excessive amount of regular hours? So that is, we look at that by taking all of the regular hours that were paid out in all of the pay periods and sorting them. So typically, an employee would receive about 80 regular hours per pay period, but there are instances where an employee is paid out 160, 120. So that is something that would flag in our system. Additionally, there are employees that have received duplicate payroll payments, so 2 paychecks for the same pay period and same work. There are also other components to this analytic that look at identifying exceptions through wage recalculations. So one way we do this is by recalculating the employee's pay rate based on the regular earnings and the hours worked. So we take the regular earnings.
This all the employees?
All, yes. So the program pulls in all the data and runs it through the script.
Why, yeah, I mean, this falls a lot on you. There's another department that probably does that. So you're like a double fact checker?
Their current, I mean, I don't know that there's another department there's not another department that's providing oversight to the extent that this is.
I think there should be, but we'll talk
Well,
about that.
audit does look at different areas, but
They take snapshots. With the audit, they say they take a little bit, let's audit, so we're going to
Yes.
do 20% or 10%.
So we're able to look at 100% through the data analytics program because we're
I
able
look
to pull
forward
it
to
all.
understanding this a little bit more. And the only question I have, it comes up all the time, when somebody gets separated, they get a duplicate check, they think it's a bonus. And they don't want to pay it back, and they get fussy because it's our fault. How do we handle that? If they're already separated, they're all gone, so we might get beat on it. If they're still working, we balance it out through their payment as the process goes.
There are instances with some of our employees that are paid past termination, which is part of what we are looking at. We're looking at regular hours paid 14 or more days after an employee separates from the county. So there are instances where it is difficult, if not close to impossible, to try to collect from that employee without expending an incredible amount of resources. So for those, especially for some of the older ones, the county has to at some point make a decision on how it wants to proceed and what amount of resources it wants to take. But there are, I mean, for these overpayments, if they're receiving money that they're not entitled to receive, if they don't ultimately agree it back and the county does want to pursue it, at that point, the prosecutor's office can get involved.
I'd be curious, because these are the dollars for the 20. It happens rarely, though, right?
2020 and 2021.
Would you say it happens rarely? Of all the employees that got separated or get a duplicate, it's 0.2%?
Oh, it's a very low
0.0000.
percentage when you're looking at the entire population, for sure.
Got it. Okay, what do we got?
So once just going back really, yes.
Next slide's fine. We got this.
Okay.
We understand it. Jack's really smart.
We got this covered.
Okay. So one of the investigations we completed last year was into X jail. We became aware that the Sheriff's Department was working to implement a jail management system called X jail, but that it never went live. X jail was offered by Securus Technologies, which is the vendor that currently provides the inmate communication system for our inmates. So that service allows our inmates to have phone calls and video visitations with their family and friends.
Heard this one last year. We're familiar with this.
Okay.
Jumped on it.
It was, yes. So we also learned that X-Jail was offered and contracted for at the same time the county entered into the contract with Securus. So the county issued an RFP for an inmate communication system and provided an option to also propose a jail management system, which X-Jail did. The county selected X-Jail and then entered into an 8-year contract. Also of note, in Securus's proposal, it said that it would have X-Jail up and running in 4 months, and that was back in 2016. So despite the fact that the parties thought the jail management system would be implemented within months, they spent the next 5 years working to implement X-Jail. Then in November of 2021, 5 years after the contract was signed and 1 month before the planned go-live date, Securus notified the county that it would be sunsetting support for X-Jail in 2024. So 2 months later, the county then decided not to go live with XJail, to stick with the current jail management system they had for the time being, since support would be ending in just a couple years for XJail. So that's a bit of the background. I noted a couple things on the slide. So first, we kept hearing that XJail was a free system. However, it was actually a $1.284 million system. Per the terms of the agreement between the county and Securus, it was to be paid for out of the commissions earned off of the revenue generating contract for the phone calls, yes. So our commission checks from Securus for the phone system were being reduced each month for the cost of XJail. You'll see on the side, the county spent a little over $1.1 million in its effort to implement XJail, which is a combination of the commission reductions and the internal labor, and as XJail was never implemented, that entire amount is waste. A couple other things of note, the contract between Securus and the county was for both the inmate communication system as well as XJail, the jail management system. However, the council resolution that was presented it only stated that it was to Securus for a revenue generating contract for $12 million for the inmate communication system. And the council presentation also did not mention XJail or the associated $1.284 million cost. And if you were to look at the agreements between the county and XJail, that information was not contained in any of the whereas clauses. In addition, Securus had fronted us $696,000 to start implementing the system, which was also not included in any council presentation.
How does this end?
For XJail, or for,
This particular boondoggle, did they get in trouble? They give us our money back? We got beat out of it?
well, right now, as it currently stands, this matter is with the law department, and they are trying to work to recover at least some of this money. So just two other things quickly of note. The contract assumed that XJail would be up and running within months. So the monthly payments per the contract, which kicked in 2 years after the contract was signed, were for a combination of installation costs and maintenance and support, which means that all that times $457,000 we've paid for maintenance and support to maintain and support a system that was not live. Additionally, the county had decided internally in January of 2022 that we were not going to go forward with XJail. However, as of the time of our investigation last year, we noticed that XJail was still deducting the $15,111 each month for the cost of XJail. And we brought that to the sheriff's department's attention. They stopped the payments in May of 2023, but by that time, the county had already paid $241,000 to Securus for XJail after it decided not to go with XJail. So those are high-level findings from that investigation. But to your question of what now, right now we look to see how we can recover. And the law department has been in contact with me several times about they're figuring out things on their end about how best to move forward and what the number is to collect here, because Securus definitely there's a lot to blame on Securus's end, but we certainly didn't bring our A game to implement the system.
Just before Jack starts, since you put a slide up, you're gonna get questions. And once again, this doesn't sound like your world. How did you see this and went over? Did someone tell you to go over?
So actually, we learned of XJail when we were in the sheriff's department doing our commissary investigations.
Oh, way back. Yeah.
Yes. So, and actually, we were in the sheriff's department commissary doing those investigations because of a complaint we had received for something very minor over there, but then it alerted us to a lot of the other issues. And then when we were talking to people regarding the commissary, we heard, oh, but XJail is going to fix this, XJail. So we were hearing about XJail, but we didn't know about XJail, and that's what caused us to dig a little bit deeper.
Good. So the old management's out. We have a new management now.
Yes.
And hopefully, when you go over there, everything's going to be lovely. Mr. Chairman.
This is the same thing that we had with the valuations when we were doing the real estate valuations.
The Harris Project.
Don't we learn anything? Don't pay maintenance on a product you don't even have. I mean, it makes no crazy. we paid hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, and we paid millions of dollars on the real estate valuation one. We finally put back and said, hey, why are we paying maintenance on product we didn't even have in our, I mean, you wouldn't pay for our maintenance on your truck
Right,
if you didn't
have
own the truck.
Right.
If you didn't- The truck was there, this is 2 softwares in a row now that we're doing this. It's just
And it's
crazy.
not funny.
It's not funny. There's no wonder why taxpayers look at us and say, we don't know how to run our ship.
How do we get our hands, this is you. I'm not,
I'm not picking on you, I'm just.
no, but this is where you gonna put your,
Somebody should be investigated and because you're telling us there was $15,000 per month.
month.
Per month, coming off
Who is
of,
signing off on a 15? I mean, it's the same thing we just talked about a second ago. You get an invoice, it should match up with a payable, and, oh, wait a minute, we never even got a product. Why are we signing off?
well, part of the
There's
problem,
incompetency that just boggles your
It's
mind.
waste.
it is a lot, it's
This is
$1.1
waste, fraud, and
million
abuse
in
in-
waste.
In
Dale, as my finance chair, is this something that is piquing your interest, that you might try to work on rectifying this? Or
Well,
we can do it
it's,
here.
it certainly piques my interest, and Jack, while you were out, I asked a number of questions about the $350,000 in refunds that were old and haven't gotten back for over a year and a half. So yes, it totally piques my interest, but I would note that we're talking about things that are pretty far in the rearview mirror. So my interest would be in terms of what kind of systems can we put in place so that things like this don't happen going forward. That's where my interest would be.
Oh, absolutely.
Is anybody disciplined? Is any management person who runs this department or the previous department being disciplined? I mean, to me, that's where your department comes into play. Hey, Mr. County Executive, I am suggesting that there is failure of management in these areas.
Not, to my knowledge, nobody has been disciplined, but to receive I agree though, to receive the commission checks and see a $15,111 deduction for X-Jail each month is,
One is the
It's
staff
really-
level person who's doing it, and shame on them. But then there's a boss that's sitting above that person that certainly ought to be looking at this at least monthly or quarterly. Holy
you would
crap.
think, and that was one of our
Well, then they should,
recommendations.
they're,
Check's still being cut?
No, when we brought that to the attention
Sure.
at the time, Rhonda Gibson, the current jail administrator at the time, who's no longer there, she worked to stop to get those.
but somebody should be written up. I'm sorry, but and it should be in their personnel jacket. And if we find this a continuing problem, whether or not we choose to do something disciplinary, but that you clearly should document this in writing, in their personnel jacket, saying, this is the boss who actually has allowed this to go under their tutelage, under their direction.
I think it's more than
And I hope it's by accident as opposed to design, but
yeah, I think it's more than something than a file. Because it's $15,000 for a product that we might have had but didn't work. Or we
Well,
didn't even
it was
have.
never implemented, it never went
Yeah, so-
live. And so those
That's-
$15,000 payments accrued to the tune of
That is-
$241,000
That's
after we
incomprehensible.
knew that we
I
weren't
think.
going to go forward with.
I'm glad you
with
bring
that
it, I mean, this
system.
is what public hearings are about, and transparency is a given, but uncovering things and rectifying them, both from compensation that has been delivered and moving forward. I'm glad we're having this conversation, and hopefully in 6 months, we'll have some kind of a update on how we're doing it. And I want to be actively
so.
part of this if you want me to, in regards to the information my colleagues have enlightened me, and I'll play my role.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to see is, if you're going to write this up, and I believe you will, it should go to the person who's in charge, and then it should ultimately get to his desk. And then what happens with that afterwards? If you find that all it was it just got stuck in a dead letter file, we didn't get anywhere. There should be some kind of causal action that takes place.
Without being,
I'm not trying to say fire somebody, but I am telling it needs to be
No,
documented.
right,
I don't
agree.
want any extra work on you, so maybe you can delegate this. But there's a couple I don't knows and maybes right now. Who did it? How much was it? Why was it done? I mean, it could be because they didn't know about it. A didn't talk to B. But I'd like to, we have some questions here. Can we, if it's not, I don't want you to, you're overloaded already.
Well, I'm not concerned about that.
Maybe is this something our staff could help jump into? We'll
I'm
talk about
happy
it
to
later.
follow up to see what, if repercussions, I wouldn't
Not
be
even
the one
repercussions,
administering
to
the.
understand exactly what happened so we don't do it again. And stop this practice is my hope, on many different
We have two of
levels.
them back to back, though. We just did the whole thing with all over the real estate where we paid for maintenance on a contract and the vendor never even delivered the software.
But the difference there is that they had come for the appropriate approvals and the appropriate transparency, at least, so you had the opportunity to ask questions. Here, it wasn't conducted that way. And so there were things happening, such as change orders that were being agreed to without receiving the appropriate approvals because the money was just going to be coming off of commissions.
Good?
So, I would stick up for the Inspector General a little bit.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
In the
We are
sense
not
that,
worthy.
that you're the investigating agency, and we're mostly talking about what's going to be done after the report has been issued, which you can play a role on, but it's primarily not your agency's responsibility. But I would also point out the legislation that former Councilwoman Baker passed that I co-sponsored that requires that if the Inspector General issues a report that the agency affected has to respond to it. And so if you could put out some recommendations on things that they could do to prevent things like this from happening in the future and force them under this legislation to respond to your report, well, maybe that might help get the ball rolling.
And thank you, Councilman Miller. And we have issued recommendations, and one of the first recommendations is being addressed is working with the law department on the piece to see what we can recoup, if anything, and then moving
That's
forward for the
important,
next.
but it's stuck in my head, and I believe Jack said in Dale's, $15,000 a month was paid for a product we never saw. So
That was being
I'd like-
referred to as a free system because yes.
I would like that to be answered as well. And you said recommendations. Don't you have powers besides that, right?
Yes,
So use every power that this council gave you that is under your responsibility tutelage. Okay, thank you for that one. How many contractors are disbarred?
so moving on to contractors, any more questions before I go on?
No.
Okay, so
That looks really good, but the big question is the debarments. We always get to that. Does any bad guys got kicked off?
So in 2023, we actually did not debar any contractors. We do have 28 contractors currently debarred, and you can see the pie chart there that shows when those debarments will be rolling off. We did initiate several debarment matters in 2023 that most of them were due to taxes. So what happens is when a contractor does more than $10,000 in business with the county each year, unless an exemption applies, they must register with our agency. registration is a 3-step process. They fill out a form, they pay a fee, and they take ethics training. Once they register with our agency, and you can see that we registered 179 contractors first half and 268 contractors the second half. Once they register with our agency, we do a comprehensive background check on the contractor and the principal. And that includes, a part of that is looking for outstanding tax issues. So whenever we have a reasonable belief that a contractor is in violation of the county's debarment law, we initiate a debarment matter in our case management system. That doesn't necessarily mean official formal proceedings have actually been initiated against a contractor. It just means they're on our radar. And we're looking into the possibility of formally initiating debarment proceedings. In the case of outstanding taxes, which you'll see on the slide, for the contractors that were registered first half, we identified $993,028 in delinquent taxes, and second half, we identified $554,000 in delinquent taxes. When we identify outstanding tax issues, we open an internal debarment matter, and then we go through our defined process of contacting the contractor to try to spur.
Let's comply.
Most of them do. So out of all of that we identified last year in working through our, in registering the contractors, and looking at the background checks, we didn't have to debar any for taxes or otherwise last year. So
Got their attention.
we got their attention, and so thankfully, this has been a successful endeavor. You'll see of the debarment matters, we initiated 35 in the first half, resolved 56, and then second half, we initiated 28 and resolved 36.
Very good. The only question I have is, of the duplicate payments from previous, that the,
Duplicate payments?
I'm going from a different
Oh, okay.
slide. Duplicate payments to a contractor, there's $300-some thousand that's been agreed to that they've been duplicated. And I imagine some of those contractors are reluctant to give it back.
Oh, I
Is that
see.
a debarment? You
It
said the
can be. So
taxes.
once we really start working and, once we get a little further into the process of working with the departments on ensuring that they have taken it to as far as they can in recouping any duplicate payments. If they can't take it any further, if the contractors are refusing, then we do have steps. I mean, we can initiate debarment proceedings. The law department could initiate suit.
I just like to,
but
I mean, right
No,
now,
we could initiate debarment proceedings for sure.
yeah, in my eyes, they agree to it, they're not paying it. You can ask them nice, you can send them a letter. I don't care if it's $100. If they're going to disrespect us, you have that tool to be used at your discretion.
We do. And to be clear, I don't know for certain that none of that amount is in dispute. It's just, it has not reached me that any of those amounts, that of the
No,
350.
we're all good.
Okay.
We're not, you are a rock star, so we're just trying to understand it.
Thank you.
And through these discussions, become enlightened so we can help learn things. So we're very thankful. So thank you for the contractors. And the last one is, you think I'm going to give you a comment? Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was just a jest.
Regarding the contractors, it appears that this is one of your most successful programs that you run, because you look at this, you brought in $1.55 million worth of taxes that otherwise might not have been collected. That's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
big deal. So I just wanted to draw a little light to it.
Thank you. And also, in addition to the taxes, it does, when contractors register, it's a $100 fee, and that fee goes to support our operations. And we do register, we probably bring in somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 in revenue each year from this program. And we also had a part of our data analytics program identify contractors doing more than $10,000 in business with the county that weren't registered, and as a part of that, we were able to bring in an additional $6,000. So just wanted to add that there.
Do you see how well and efficient things work when you're doing it? Think about that. When
Thank
you're
you.
solely responsible for the 1,500,000 almost, and then the 1,640 doesn't sound like much, but it's money that we would never had, and everybody's complying. And that little 6,000, exciting. So that's just a reflection that hopefully everybody's can use you as the example.
Well, thank you.
So what's this, number 9, ethics?
Yes. So a big part of promoting a culture of ethical compliance is the ability to guide employees before they act. To that end, we encourage employees and elected officials to reach out to us with any questions that they may have regarding whether any proposed conduct complies with the county ethics code. As you'll see on the slide, we issued 81 ethics advisory opinions the first half of 2023 and 95 ethics advisory opinions the second half of 2023. And I'd just like to note 95 ethics advisory opinions in one half is an all-time high for our agency and surpasses our previous record high of 92 issued second half of 2022. And just to give you an idea of how many that is, the pre-2022 average was 39 ethics advisory opinions issued in a half. So I think we overall had a great year last year. We had some strong accomplishments, but this is what I am most proud of because it shows our employees are wanting to do what's right, and it shows that our agency is approachable, and I think that's equally important. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Anything on the ethics? I have one.
Okay,
We see you twice a year,
yes,
minimum. You're available anytime we want.
yes,
And we have ethics training once a year.
yes.
So we see you on a screen, but what are the chances of you coming back in person? What do you think, gentlemen, on this dais?
I would welcome that. And actually, I just had the executive's office, because they're newer, a lot of them are newer to county government and public employment. And so they also requested a higher level ethics training. And so I would be honored to come and do that for council.
In person?
Yes.
Because you always put on the video.
We could. And the trick is, I was actually wanting to do that anyway, because when the topics that are covered in the annual ethics training, that is what applies to most typical employees. But there are some issues that are very complex that I address only at a high level in the annual ethics training that goes out to everyone, but that really apply to individuals such as yourselves, such as conflicts of interest and prohibited interest in a public contract. So yes, I would welcome that opportunity.
Good. And the thing I found, lacking is the wrong word. It's when I'm watching the video, something pops in my head and I can't ask that question. Having you here with your team could help rectify that. And I think some of my colleagues would also benefit from that. So anything else? Any closing comments?
Thank you. Thank you for the time today.
The only closing comments are you're doing a great job on the components you touch, but it almost equaled the amount of money that we lost from duplications of payments. And it's sad that you're going one step forward and half a step backwards on some of this stuff, not through any of your fault. It's disappointing when you see that in public government.
I'm confident that through recommendations and working with the departments, that each half we do the review, I think they're going to keep getting better. So I'm confident.
Under your leadership, and you are confident, and you do a great job. So thank you. You enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you as well.
Meeting is miscellaneous. This meeting is adjourned.